Hello and welcome. I'm Pip Tomson and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Israel moves closer to a ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's thought Israel's security cabinet could approve the deal tomorrow. 17 people are missing after a tourist boat sinks in the Red Sea. Russia claims Ukraine has attacked in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Putin's powerful Oreshnik missile wreck is analysed. And a former British Army soldier has reportedly been captured by Russia whilst fighting for Ukraine. To the developing conflict in the Middle East first, and a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah is close. That's according to a Lebanese official who confirmed the story to Al Arabiya News. Israel's security cabinet is expected to approve the deal tomorrow. So far, the war has resulted in the deaths of 3,500 Lebanese people in over a year. It comes after Hezbollah attacked near Tel Aviv yesterday, following an Israeli airstrike that killed 29 people in Beirut on Saturday. For more on this, I'm joined from Tel Aviv by our correspondent Sarah Coates. Good evening to you, Sarah. How much optimism is there then that a ceasefire can be achieved? And do run us through the sticking points.
Hello there, Pip. There really is growing optimism here in the region that a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel could actually be achieved in the coming hours, if not tomorrow. Now, we do understand that there are no objections in Lebanon to this US-backed proposal. And here in Israel, it certainly does seem as though things are moving forward. Now, with regards to these sticking points, originally there was a sticking point that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was objecting to France basically having anything to do with implementing this deal, given that France has come out after this ICC ruling came out that was saying that, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu and the former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant would be arrested, with France saying that it would actually abide by this if any of these, if these two men were to set foot on French soil. Now, we do understand that this one has now been wiped, that this would be looked after by a five-party body that would be led by the United States, would also include France. But one of these other sticking points is Israel basically wants the freedom to respond militarily to Hezbollah if this ceasefire deal is violated. So once again, it certainly does seem as though this is moving forward. It would be based on the principles of the UN Resolution 1701, which would mean that these Hezbollah fighters would need to push further north, back behind the Litani River, while Israeli forces would have to completely withdraw from Lebanon. It would be this five-party body that would be monitoring that both sides would be adhering to this proposal. Now, we did also hear from the new foreign minister here in Israel, Gideon Sa'ar. He came out to say that the ceasefire hinges on enforcement and that Hezbollah, of course, must be disarmed and pushed away from the border. We will, of course, know more in the coming hours, but once again, it certainly does appear as though things are moving forward, Pip.
Yes, so it is advancing, Sarah, this ceasefire, but both Israel and Hezbollah attacked over the weekend, didn't they? In fact, it was quite intense. Are we likely to see any more of this whilst we wait for that ceasefire agreement that could come tomorrow?
We certainly are, and as these talks continue, so do hostilities. I'll bring you up to speed with what's happening in Lebanon first. We do know that there have been fresh strikes in the east of the country, in the Bekaa Valley, the death toll standing at around 9 there, while there have been additional strikes in the south of Lebanon, in the Tyre region, with the Lebanese health authorities saying that so far, with these strikes that happened just a few hours ago, that 15 people have been killed. Well, there's been a fresh evacuation order for the Dahya area in southern Beirut, which is traditionally a Hezbollah stronghold. Now, here in Israel, there are continued red alert sirens ringing out, especially in these largely evacuated northern communities. But really over the past sort of day and a half, there's been a real increase in hostilities. Yesterday, there were many red alert sirens ringing out in the centre of the country, including right here in Tel Aviv, with some of these missiles that did come from Lebanon actually making impact. They were not intercepted by the Iron Dome missile defence system, and they did cause quite substantial damage about 30 kilometres from where I'm standing in this suburb of Tel Aviv known as Petah Tikva. Pip.
Sarah, I'm just going to try that again. I wanted to ask you about this passenger boat that has sunk in the Red Sea. What can you tell us about that?
Certainly, this is still a developing story. We do understand that there was an alert put out by the Bureau of Meteorology in Egypt on Sunday, warning no vessels should travel out due to extremely rough seas, rough conditions in the Red Sea. It's unclear as to why this vessel that was carrying reportedly 45 people, including a number of foreign nationals, actually did set out. 17 people are reportedly missing, among them a number of foreign nationals, with helicopters reportedly searching this area, trying to actually locate these people. So once again, this is still a developing story. It's unclear as to why this vessel did set out, but it did take on water. It put out a distress call at around 3:30 GMT today, and we do understand that this search and rescue effort is ongoing.
Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv, thank you. To the US now, and farm industry groups have asked President-elect Trump to spare their sector from his promise of mass deportations, which they say would have a dramatic effect on the food supply chain, which relies on illegal workers. Trump made immigration central to his re-election, and it now appears that he will use the US military to carry out his pledge. It's causing widespread anxiety in migrant communities across the US, and as Tony Waterman reports, has spurred thousands of migrants to make a last-ditch push towards the border.
It's a race against time. Thousands of migrants from across Latin America marching towards the US southern border, trying to reach it before President-elect Donald Trump is sworn in on January 20th.
We're afraid that we might not be able to pass because of Trump.
There might be deportations, but God willing, it won't happen to us.
That's exactly what migrants already in the U.S. are afraid of. Trump has vowed to expel upwards of 11 million people by declaring a national emergency and mobilizing the U.S. military to carry out mass deportations.
There are probably legal ways of doing it.
One option, says law professor Niels Frenzen, would be to federalize and deploy National Guard troops for the purpose of keeping order.
There's a basis in federal law that allows the federal government to place National Guard troops, which are nominally under the control of the governor of a particular state, but they can be federalized and deployed on the streets for law enforcement purposes. That would be, I think, the easier legal path.
Another option, experts say, is to go after immigrants already in the system, like the 863,000 people protected from deportation because their home countries are too dangerous to return to. Or DACA recipients, a program that shields undocumented people who were brought to the U.S. as children from deportation.
We're talking about over 500,000 people who currently have DACA, all of whom would lose their legal permission to be living in the United States and the work authorization that comes. Now, what's complicated about that is, of course, that these people have been here for a very long time.
Migrant aid groups are reporting widespread anxiety, people fearing what comes next.
The reality is that we do not know what happens now. We tell people, now it's a good time to consult an attorney. It's a good time to get your affairs in order.
Here in Texas, Republican officials want to play a leading role in Trump's immigration policy. The state has already offered up land for detention camps to hold migrants before they're deported. The governor has also vowed to install more floating barriers in the Rio Grande River, separating Mexico from the U.S. The message is clear. If you're on your way here, don't come. And if you're already here, get out. Tony Waterman, Al Arabiya News, Austin, Texas.
I want to bring you some other news making the headlines around the world. One person has died and 3 others have been left injured after a cargo plane crashed near Vilnius airport in Lithuania earlier today. The DHL plane, flown by Spanish cargo airline Swiftair, crashed as it was coming into land. The cause of the crash is still being investigated, but the Lithuanian Defence Ministry says there are no signs of terrorism or sabotage. 3 people have been arrested after the body of an Israeli-Moldovan rabbi who went missing in the United Arab Emirates was found over the weekend. Zvi Kogan went missing on Thursday. His body was discovered in the Emirati city of Al Ain. The Emirati Interior Ministry said the ministry would use all legal powers to respond decisively and without leniency to any actions or attempts that threaten societal stability. The far-right pro-Putin candidate Kalin Georgescu has taken the lead in the first round of Romania's presidential election. Georgescu, who has no party of his own, has campaigned primarily on social media platform TikTok. The latest results could mean Georgescu would face centre-right candidate Elena Lasconi of the Save Romanian Union in the final stage of the election on the 8th of December. And more than 30 pilot whales who found themselves stranded on Ruakaka Beach near the city of Whangarei in New Zealand have been returned to the ocean. Hundreds of volunteers, who included conservation workers and members of the public, lifted the mammals out on sheets and into the water. To the ongoing crisis between Russia and Ukraine now. Today, Russia has said it has shot down 8 ballistic missiles sent by Ukraine. Russia's defence ministry has not revealed which type of missiles were launched, but it's thought to be the US-supplied ATACMS, authorised by the Biden administration last week. It comes as Ukraine continues to test the wreckage of Russia's new Oreshnik missile, which was fired in response to Joe Biden's policy shift. For more on this, I'm joined from Kyiv by our correspondent Megumi Lim. Hello to you, Megumi. Tell me, has there been any response at all from Ukraine about these claims from Russia?
Well, we've not yet heard from Ukraine regarding this latest missile attack that was reportedly launched by Ukraine against Russia. As you said, Russia's defense ministry said that 8 ballistic missiles were shot down overnight, launched by Ukraine, but did not give any further details as to what kind of missile was used and where in Russia it was used against. But we did hear from the regional governor of Russia's Kursk region saying that 7 of those missiles were shot down over Russia's Kursk region. Now, this is where fighting has been ongoing between Ukrainian and Russian forces ever since Ukrainian forces launched their surprise incursion into Russia in August of this year. But the governor also didn't provide any more details. However, a military analyst who is also serving as an advisor to this same governor said or claimed that the missiles that were used overnight were, quote, foreign made. So again, it is unclear what kind of missiles were used. Not a lot of details coming out from Russia or Ukraine. But as you said, very possible that it could be the American-supplied ATACMS missiles. We saw Washington lift restrictions on the use of Ukraine's use of these American-supplied ATACMS missiles last week. And we've seen Kyiv waste no time in using them. And we have already seen Ukrainian forces fire these American-supplied missiles into Russia.
Now, experts are carefully studying the debris, aren't they, from Russia's long-range Oreshnik missile, which was fired into Ukraine last week. And what they learn will be crucial when it comes to Ukraine formulating its response.
That's right. Ukrainian experts have begun analyzing the wreckage that was recovered from this attack carried out by Russia using its new intermediate range ballistic missile called the Oryeshnik. As you said, this was the first time that this missile was used against Ukraine, and its use has caused a lot of alarm because of its capability to mount a nuclear warhead. Also, the use of this weapon came just days after Russia updated its nuclear doctrine to lower its threshold for a nuclear strike. Now, Russian President Putin did say that in this instance, there was no nuclear warhead attached, but obviously this wreckage is of great interest to Ukraine. And the study of this debris will be useful for Ukraine in gaining insight into Russian military supply chains, but also Russia's missile production, the components used. But more importantly, insight into how to develop a countermeasure. Experts have said this missile can fly as fast as 13,000 kilometers per hour, and Russian President Putin has said that currently there are no air defense systems that can intercept this missile. However, President Zelensky of Ukraine has refuted this. He's saying that the world does possess air defense systems that can counter this threat. And in light of this latest attack, Ukraine is now asking the United States to update the Patriot air defense systems, which Ukraine has several of provided by the United States. Or Ukraine is asking the US to supply the THAAD anti-ballistic missile defense systems. These air defense systems are capable of intercepting these types of missiles. So we're seeing the first Ukrainian response, and also a priority for Ukraine is air defense systems to protect the skies over Ukraine.
Megumi Lim in Kyiv, thank you. A man claiming to be a former British Army soldier has been captured by Russian forces whilst fighting for Ukraine. The 22-year-old, named James Scott Rees-Anderson, says he signed up for Ukraine's International Legion after being fired from his job as a private. Well, for more on this, I'm joined from London by our correspondent, Olly Barrett. Hello to you, Olly. What more then can you tell us about this captured Briton, and how did he end up fighting for Ukraine?
Well, what we know from the Russian side comes via the TASS news agency in Russia, which quotes a military source saying that a UK mercenary, is how this person is described, was taken prisoner in the Kursk area of Russia. Of course, that is the area that Ukraine has recently made a surprise offensive into. The videos that have been seen circulating online do show this individual, James Scott Rees-Anderson, giving us some of the background about how he came to be in Ukraine fighting there. He says that he lost his job in the UK, travelled from London to Poland on an aeroplane, and then took a bus to the border with Ukraine, and then crossing the border into Ukraine to join the so-called International Legion, which is made up of international foreign volunteers. We're told that he decided to go and fight, having heard and read about the conflict in Ukraine back here in Britain. His father has been speaking to UK media today and says that he did what he thought was right, but he also says, his father, that he is now very frightened about the state of his son. As I say, there are a couple of videos in which he gives some of his own background. James Scott Rees-Anderson talking about having served in the British military himself before losing his job here in Britain, talking about having lost everything at that point and deciding at that point to head to Ukraine and join up, as I say, with this International Legion, and Russian sources now suggesting that what they call a mercenary has been taken prisoner.
Olly, we are looking at pictures of him, or we have been looking in the last few seconds. Can you tell us any information about where he's being held and in what sort of conditions?
Well, only really from what we've been hearing from his father today, who talks about believing that his son looks very frightened. He talks about the fears that he has that his son could be tortured, because he says that's what James Anderson had told him Russians do to prisoners that they take during this conflict. And so clearly his family very concerned for his welfare indeed. We've also been hearing from the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy today. He says that the UK will do all we can to offer this UK national all the support we can. We also have a brief statement from the UK Foreign Office as well, which says that it is supporting the family of a British man following reports of his detention. Clearly there is still a lot that is unknown about the exact circumstances of his detention and location. One of the things that his father has been speaking about today is the possibility that he could end up being used as what his father describes as a bargaining chip in some kind of prisoner exchange perhaps, and that might lead to his release. But for now, as I say, his father insisting that he is frightened about the state and the welfare and the well-being of his son.
Yes, and of course that prisoner exchange did happen to two other Britons who were captured a couple of years ago. Let me just quickly ask you as well, Olly, about British Government Minister Pat McFadden. Now, he's warned people about Russia's escalating cyber aggression at the NATO Cyber Defence Conference. Can you tell us briefly a little bit more about what he's been saying?
Yeah, he has indeed. Pat McFadden has been warning about the dangers of escalating cyber attacks from Russia over the Ukraine conflict, directed towards some of Ukraine's allies. He's been talking about how the UK is going to set up a new AI unit which can try and deal with some of these attacks before they are launched. But he's also told the audience at the NATO cyber conference here in Britain that the UK will remain unwavering in its support for the Ukrainians, despite threats in recent days from Russia about the view that it believes that it has the right now to attack UK military facilities, given the supply of UK Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine to be used to strike targets deeper inside Russian territory.
Olly Barrett talking to me in London. Thank you very much. On January the 20th, Donald Trump will be sworn in as US president for the second time. His first term in office was marked by radical economic policies, and there is uncertainty in Europe over new tariffs he may introduce during his second stint in power. Ross Cullen reports from Paris on the potential impact in France.
The election of an American president has consequences outside the US, and for Europe, some of the impacts could be economic.
In terms of France, that would be in the range of 10 to 20%. And he specifically mentioned wine, and that's the only product that he has mentioned to my knowledge, especially during his rallies with his supporters across the US.
One possible positive for people in France, the incoming president's pledge to lower the price of oil, which could bring down the cost of filling up all over the world.
But the head of France's central bank says Donald Trump's promised tariffs and protectionist economics would mean, quote, higher inflation, most likely in the United States, and most probably lower growth throughout the world.
And it's not just trade where there could be a potential economic impact.
American companies are the number one foreign investor in R&D activities in France. So if there was anything that would impact those investments, that would be something of concern for France, which has made a very overt effort under Mr. Macron since he's been president with this program Choose France, for example, to attract American investment to France.
Paris is one of Washington's oldest and closest allies. And outside the European Union, the United States is France's biggest trading partner. As the incoming American administration prepares to take office, France is readying itself for all economic outcomes of a second Trump term. Ross Cullen, Al Arabiya News, Paris.
Bringing you some of the top business news now, and oil prices slipped today after increasing 6% last week. Analysts are linking supply concerns to tensions between the West and producers in Russia and Iran. Brent crude futures fell 43 cents to $74.74 a barrel, while US West Texas Intermediate crude futures were at $70.73 a barrel. That's down at 51 cents. The much-anticipated film Wicked is expected to have the top-grossing opening weekend of any Broadway musical adaptation ever in North America, as well as in the UK and Ireland. The blockbuster is expected to take $114 million in North America, superseding the takings of Les Miserables, which raked in $103 million in its opening weekend in 2012. Bringing you some sports news now, and India have completed a 295-run win over Australia in the first test in Perth, continuing their incredible streak in the country. Australia were bowled out for 238 in the final session to take a 1-0 lead. It means India have now won 5 and lost just 2 of their past 9 tests in Australia. And Liverpool striker Mo Salah has said he's disappointed by the club's reluctance to offer him a new contract. The 32-year-old Egyptian is their top scorer this season, responsible for 2 goals at the weekend against Southampton. In Pakistan, tens of thousands of supporters of jailed Prime Minister Imran Khan are closing in on Islamabad, demanding he be released. Ahead of their arrival, the capital has been shut down, with Khan's supporters threatening to hold an indefinite sit-in there. Khan has been in jail for a year, but his party says the corruption charges against him are false. Hira Mustafa has more from Islamabad.
Pitched battles between supporters of Imran Khan and security teams, as security teams use tear gas shells and rubber bullets, accusing protesters of pelting stones. The first group of Khan's supporters are bearing down on the capital city. Tens of thousands more are still making their way to Islamabad from other parts of the country, even as 4,000 protesters have been detained nationwide. Imran Khan, who has been in jail since August last year, has called this a make-or-break chance for his party workers and supporters to have their voices heard.
We have responded to Khan's final call. We will march and protest in Islamabad. We will not return till we don't secure Khan's release.
Let the authorities do whatever they can to stop us. We will not back down. They have shut the country down for 3 days. They want citizens to act like slaves to their whims and directives. We will not give up till Khan walks out of jail.
Ahead of their arrival, Islamabad, a city of 1.2 million people, has been paralyzed. Authorities have barricaded the city with shipping containers. Schools are shut. Internet and data services suspended indefinitely, as thousands of soldiers in riot gear stand guard. The government accuses Imran Khan of inciting unrest, but it's citizens who are paying the price for this standoff.
The repeated protests are not only damaging the country's economy, but are also driving the nation towards instability.
On one side there is government and on the other the opposition. They must come together to resolve the political deadlock.
Imran Khan was ousted from power in 2022 and has been in jail since last year, facing more than 100 corruption charges. His party claims he's innocent and the charges are a way to keep Khan in jail indefinitely. The government and the country's powerful military deny this. Experts say the response to Imran Khan's protest call proves that the jail's leader remains immensely popular.
This protest is only the latest in a nearly year-long standoff between the government and Imran Khan's party. But the cost of this unending political standoff, experts warn, could be steep for Pakistan as the country struggles to turn its economy around. Hira Mustafa, Al Arabia News, Islamabad.
Here's a reminder of our top stories. Israel moves closer to a ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's thought Israel's Security Cabinet could approve the deal tomorrow. 17 people are missing after a tourist boat sinks in the Red Sea. Russia claims Ukraine has attacked in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Putin's powerful Oreshnik missile wreck is analysed. And a former British Army soldier has reportedly been captured by Russia whilst fighting for Ukraine. That's all from us on W News. Thank you for joining us. Talking to you next is Hadley Gamble and then Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. A very good night.